Did you know that one Nigerian woman changed how millions of people see Africa with nothing but her words? Her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. As a little girl, she noticed that almost every book she read featured people who looked nothing like her.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From wherever you're watching or whenever you are watching, welcome to another episode of Mirror Your Culture, a platform where we talk about great women and great men who mirrored their culture on the global stage of excellence. Today, we'll be talking about another interesting character from Africa, Nigeria to be precise. What if the way the world sees your entire country could be changed by one woman telling stories from a small town in Nigeria? Today, we are talking about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a novelist who didn't just write books. She wrote how millions of people understand Africa, womanhood, and identity itself. Stay with me because some of these facts are genuinely mind-blowing. Chimamanda was born on September 15, 1977 in Enugu, Nigeria. She's Igbo, one of the Nigerian's largest ethnic groups, known for its rich oral storytelling tradition, its proverbs, and its deep sense of community. Here's fact number one that surprises people. She grew up in Nsukka in a university house that once belonged to the legendary Nigerian author Chinua Achebe. Think about that for a minute. A young girl who would go on to become one of the most important writers of her generation literally grew up sleeping in the childhood shadow of the man who inspired her. She was the fifth of 6 children, raised by a father who was a professor of statistics and a mother who was the first female registrar at the University of Nigeria. Education and intellect weren't optional in her house. They were the air she breathed. And here's a twist. She actually started out studying medicine and pharmacy. Can you believe that? Medicine, not literature. She switched paths, moved to the United States at 19, and began chasing the thing that was really calling her: words.
I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals.
In 2003, she published her own debut novel, Purple Hibiscus, a story about family, faith, and quiet rebellion inside a strict Nigerian household. Critics noticed immediately. Then came Half of a Yellow Sun. In 2006, a devastating, beautiful novel about the Biafra War, a war that tore through her own family's history. This book didn't just win awards, it won the Orange Prize for Fiction and introduced an entire generation of readers to a chapter of African history that Western classrooms had largely ignored. By 2013, she released Americanah, a novel about race, migration, and identity that became a cultural phenomenon. It didn't just sit on bookshelves, it shaped conversation happening in classrooms, in politics, and everyday households about what it really means to move between culture and be seen or unseen. Now here is where it gets mind-blowing. In 2009, Chimamanda gave a TED Talk called The Dangers of a Single Story. In it, she explained something simple but revolutionary. We only ever hear one story about a person, a country, or a people. We flatten them. We lose their complexity, their humanity. That talk has since been viewed well over 30 million times. It's used in universities, in diversity trainings, in classrooms across the world, not as a suggestion, but as a foundational text on empathy and representation. Then in 2012, she gave another talk, We should all be feminists. And this is where things get almost unbelievable. Beyonce sampled that speech directly in her song, Flawless, released in 2013. A Nigerian writer's TEDx talk ended up on the biggest pop album in the world, introducing the word feminist in Chimamanda's own voice to millions of people who had never heard of her before. That's not just influence, that's culture bending around one woman's idea. What makes Chimamanda so powerful isn't just talent, it's how deeply Igbo culture and Nigerian identity runs through everything she creates. Her characters enjoy jollof rice and pounded yam. They speak in Igbo phrases woven naturally in English sentences. Her stories don't explain Africa for a Western audience. They simply exist fully, unapologetically African, and let the world catch up. She has said in her interviews that she writes the stories she wishes she read growing up. Stories where children like her were the center of the narrative, not the background, not an exotic detail. This is why her impact and her culture are inseparable. She didn't borrow a global platform and then talk about Nigeria. She brought Nigeria, its language, its wars, its humor, its heartbreak, its culture directly to the global stage in her own terms. There are lots of things to say about this woman. I'll just mention a few. But let's go rapid fire here because these are too good to skip. Number one, she was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship in 2008, often called the Genius Grant. She was only in her early 30s. 2. Her essay, We Should All Be Feminist, was turned into a small book and Sweden distributed a copy to every 16-year-old student in the country. An entire nation's teenagers reading her own words as part of growing up. 3. She holds numerous honorary doctorates from universities around the world, despite once studying to be a pharmacist. Number 4. She's often named amongst Times Magazine's most influential people globally, standing shoulder to shoulder with world leaders, scientists, and icons for writing stories about a girl from Enugu. She didn't just influence readers, she influenced how publishing itself thinks about African literature, opening doors for a new wave of African writers who came after her. Here's the truth at the center of Chimamanda Adichie's story. She never asked permission to take up space. She wrote in her own accent. She centered her own culture. She turned her specific local Igbo language experience into something the entire world should recognize as universal. And that's the real lesson here. Not just for writers, but for everyone watching this. You. Your story, however local it feels, however small you think it is, has the power to move the world if you tell it with honesty and with courage. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie didn't just tell stories. She proved that one voice rooted in its own culture can rewrite a single story the world thought it knew. If this story moved you, imagine what your own story could do. Until next time, keep telling the truth in your own voice. Be safe.